Welcome to today's Walk Massachusetts statewide networking meeting. We're thrilled to have Miles Hyward, the founder and lead organizer for Boston's Walking City Trails, with us today as a speaker. And he's going to tell us about the Walking City Trails. That's an incredible asset that exists in the city of Boston. It's 27 miles long, through 30 different urban green spaces, 17 different neighborhoods. And yeah, he's going to tell us a bit about that and how what he's learned throughout the way on developing this and what other places can learn from creating urban trails in their own community. And I'll pass it off to you, Miles.
Awesome. Well, Yolanda, thank you so much for the great introduction. And I'll also add for everyone listening that we just had a hearing with the Boston City Council the other week to discuss ways in which the city of Boston can support urban trail making initiatives like the Walking City Trail at a grassroots level. And Yolanda was very kind to come into the city and testify on our community panel about many of the community and physiological benefits of having lots of legible walking routes in any community. So, but that's getting a little bit ahead. So,
Miles, your mic is a little bit low. I was wondering, is it
oh,
possible to
thing.
just move it a little closer? There you
Let's
go.
see. Is that a little bit better sound wise?
Still a little low. I don't know why. But it's okay.
You know what?
But
This
I think it's better than what it was.
okay. You know what is you know what I could do? I'm so sorry about this. I can grab another pair of headphones. I worry these ones might be dying potentially if the mic is low. So this will just take one moment. Okay. So sorry about that. Is this any better?
Sounds great.
Awesome. Okay. Well, apologies for the technical glitch, everybody, but I'll jump right back into the origin story of the Walking City Trail to begin with. So, I come from a background of traditional hiking and outdoor recreation in the backcountry. I used to work for the Appalachian Mountain Club in their high mountain huts. I've written some guidebooks on New England hiking, but having long had roots in Boston and having identified as a city person at heart for many years, loving the walkability and cross pollination effect of being in a city, the thought of whether you could replicate hiking and wayfinding that we traditionally associate with the great outdoors in the countryside is something that I have wondered, when thinking about the urban environment. And in 2019, just before the pandemic and the travel restrictions that came with it, basically made it very hard for many of us to go to the places we associate with outdoor recreation, like the countryside. I read a story in National Geographic about a project in San Francisco called the Crosstown Trail. And what this was, or is, I should say, is a 17-mile walking and hiking route that goes from the docks at Candlestick Point to the cliffs at Land's End, running diagonally across San Francisco and passing through urban forests, canyons, beaches, all these beautiful green spaces that are connected by city streets in neighborhoods that are often left off of the mainstream tourism radar. This trail, which was designed by San Franciscans who knew these spaces well, is as much an asset for residents as it is for visitors. And the best thing about it is that they made this trail for less than $600 in less than 2 years. And that's because the Crosstown Trail is not a physical project involving construction and cutting new ground for trails. It's merely the act of curating walkable spaces into one intentional, really well thought out route that's pretty accessible by public transportation in many places and also offers access to local shops, restaurants, and businesses, in addition to the green spaces that kind of comprise the backbone of the trail. So the seed of this idea that you could make a trail like this in a city was planted in my mind just as we got into the worst parts of the pandemic, when many of us were dealing with isolation and when many of us started exploring our own backyards with a renewed curiosity, because at least during the first year, that was really all a lot of us could do as far as seeking a respite from everything outdoors. And so during that time period, after spending a lot of hours clomping around parks and green spaces in Boston I hadn't been to, I wondered if we could do something like the Crosstown Trail right here in the city. And I started looking at maps. I started thinking about green spaces in Boston that are often overlooked, spaces like the Neponset River Greenway of Mattapan and Hyde Park, or Sharon Woods, or the Stony Brook Reservation that DCR manages, which is an enormous forest that many people have never set foot in who've been in Boston for decades. And so, after looking at a few maps, and thinking about, okay, which of these green spaces are located relatively close to each other? How could you walk between them, while at the same time getting a nice window into Boston neighborhoods? And I started to cobble together a theoretical map of what a trail through Boston that went from the Neponset River to Bunker Hill Monument might look like. And over the course of 3 months in early 2022, I went out to these green spaces and kind of investigated what are some of the most scenically interesting ways you could walk through here. What are some of the cool features of these green spaces that don't necessarily show up on maps? And the end result of all that poking around and sketching and note taking was the rough draft of what the Walking City Trail now is. The first version of the Walking City Trail was launched in the summer of 2022. And the way it was launched was through a dedicated website that contains maps of the route, directions on how to walk it, information about public transit connections, and also basic information about what to bring and what to prepare for being out in the elements. And actually, I can show you all the website right here by doing screen sharing. So we'll get this going. So now, whenever people want to access Walking City Trail resources, this is where they go right here, the dedicated website where you've got a splash page with the teaser about what the trail is, a little Google map insert showing the route that you can zoom into, and in addition, some teasers about how the 4 sections of the trail that add up to 27 miles will take you through these parts of Boston that have different green spaces and different scenic themes to them, starting really at the very edge of the city in a part of Boston that is very residential, rich on open space, and ending in the densest part of Boston that many of us do know very well. So it's kind of a journey from the edge of the city to the heart of Boston with a capital B, as many people know it, demonstrating the connections between all these places. And so if anybody wanted to go out and walk the route, try a piece of it, do the whole thing, you can go to this portal, the Plan a Hike button here, and access all the features you need, such as maps, directions, instructions on how to use all trails to basically hike the route with GPS. And we've been expanding these resources since the start of the trail. But the we here is important because it actually denotes the next chapter, and really the more important chapter of the Walking City Trail, which is when this went from being a solo DIY endeavor to a much more community-led project. So when the trail launched in 2022, I'd sent out a press release to local media in the hope of getting some coverage about the project, and it actually yielded some pretty nice stories from places like Streets Blog Mass and WBUR in the first few weeks. But in order to really open up this idea to people, in order to make this feel real, I started offering these free group hikes along segments of the trail to introduce people to not only the route, but the concept that you can go for a hike in the middle of a major city like Boston. And along these routes, I put it out to people, hey, this is just one interpretation of what a trail like this could be. If any of you have ideas for spaces the trail misses that we should include, maybe things that we might avoid for safety or accessibility reasons, I'm all ears. And through these hikes, which went from July through October of 2022, not only did people offer awesome feedback on how to improve the Walking City Trail, but a couple of folks stepped forward and said, I'd like to be part of this. I would like to, volunteer in this, however, in whatever capacity you need. And so basically a crew of about 6 of us emerged from this and implemented many of the changes that were suggested by people who came to these walks. And these changes included visiting additional green spaces that I had missed in my initial foray, and also adding some other scenic elements of the trail that lengthened the whole thing from 25 miles to the 27.4 miles that it now is today. So, while no urban trail route like this is finished forever because, parks can close, areas can get developed. You've always got to be ready to maybe, reshape the route as time necessitates. What I would say was the, for now, definitive version of the Walking City Trail, shaped with community input, was basically done by the winter of 2023. And since then, my fellow Walking City Trail volunteers and I have really been focused on, making the trail more visible and accessible for people. And so one of the things that we've done, I'm going to move the computer so the lighting is a little bit better. You can see this, but we have gone and put up our own homemade trail signs along parts of the route over the last 2 summers. And these signs basically do a couple of things. They indicate for someone happening upon them that actually you're standing on a trail route. You're standing on a trail that can take you, to Bunker Hill or to the Neponset or any of these spaces in between. Each sign contains a QR code that people can scan or a URL they can put in to get direct access to the maps, directions, and everything they need to understand what the Walking City Trail is and to really, take a look at where they might want to jump onto it. Sorry, I'm fighting a very weird lighting in the apartment now. I'm going to go over here. That's a little better. So those signs were installed in 2 different waves over the last 2 summers, and they were actually encouraged by one of our earliest allies within the city of Boston, who was Boston City Councilor Kendra Lara. She was the head of the Boston Parks Resiliency and Equity Committee back in 2023 and in 2022 when we connected. And she was actually largely responsible for convening our first conversation with the Boston City Council about what the Walking City Trail was and how this methodology of urban trail making could be utilized in many more ways to create additional walking routes, to make people feel more connected with their neighborhoods, to inspire cross-pollination between spaces in Boston that we think of as disparate, but are actually not that far apart from each other. One thing that's really interesting to hear from people when they attend guided hikes in the Walking City Trail is essentially, I've lived here for 20 years and I had no idea that this park or this forest or this wetland was so close by. And not only are people surprised by that quite often, but I've heard people say after these walks that in the future, not only would they consider bringing friends or neighbors back to see these spaces with them, but they would consider biking there or maybe even taking the T there, because again, that perceived distance is kind of collapsed through the impact of going out and taking a connective walk between these spaces with other folks who are coming from not just other Boston neighborhoods, but greater Boston as a whole quite often too. So that brings us to the present point where the Walking City Trail has gotten a lot more media coverage. We've been able to track how many people are hiking it lately. To give you a sense of how that's grown, when we put up our first wave of trail signs back in 2023, over the course of about 6 months, about 1,200 people scanned those signs. The latest wave of signs we put up, because some of them get taken down by the city, some of them have been deteriorated by weather, the latest wave that we put up this May, in the first 2 months alone, over 1,200 people scanned the signs at that point. So it does seem like the trail is becoming, a more recognizable fixture of the areas that it goes through. It runs through about 17 Boston neighborhoods altogether. And so now the question that we are broaching with the Boston City Council and at a purely grassroots level is twofold. This recent hearing with the City Council and members of the Wu administration that I referred to earlier was largely a conversation about what the city of Boston can do to help us further make the Walking City Trail visible and accessible. And the projects that we are going to be moving toward in the near future together are getting the trail and all its materials listed on the City of Boston channels and sites where people go to find information about the Freedom Trail, the Black Heritage Trail, and many of Boston's other officially recognized routes. We've also been discussing the prospect of joining forces in 2025 to host a new series of trail events that go beyond, piecemeal guided walks on the route. One idea that we've been starting to bat around is having a Walking City Trail day, where basically people are encouraged to come out, walk as much or little of the trail as they feel like in the span of one day, make it possible to have food trucks, artwork, music at various points along the trail, and really lean into the festive and creative element of having something like this in the city. So in addition, we're going to be talking with the city about identifying grant opportunities to help support this work, as we can. And we are in the process of looking for a fiscal sponsor so that we can open up the door to this kind of institutional support, but we are getting closer, I think, and heading in figuring that out. And so on that front alone, that's what our collaborative approach with the city will probably look like in the near future. But the other part of the road ahead, and in a way, this is the bigger step, is, the Walking City Trail is an example of what an urban trail across the city connecting neighborhoods and parks can look like. And there are many, many other possibilities that could be realized right here in Boston alone. In San Francisco, where the inspiration for this trail came from, the creators actually have added a new trail to the city that runs perpendicular to the original Crosstown Trail. So the two trails now form kind of an X across the city. And we are basically going to replicate that idea here in Boston next spring by launching a companion trail to the Walking City Trail that will run in a sort of perpendicular direction from Millennium Park in West Roxbury to Castle Island in South Boston. And while this is not really official public info quite yet, we have started to tell people about it on an informal level, because this trail is going to launch by Earth Day next year. And now that we have gone through the process of cobbling together the Walking City Trail and codifying it, we know that we can do this next one relatively quickly. And we will be hosting some free walks along the route this winter to, again, get input from people, to welcome suggestions for how the trail idea could be shaped, improved, you name it. And so that is the first step toward the long game of what we're envisioning here, which is to have a network of these trails in Boston running through every neighborhood pretty much, so that no matter where you live in the city, you have a route to walk that will connect you to this larger network of park-to-park trails across town. And there's a project that I have been studying intently for the last few months, which is based in the United Kingdom, called Slowways, which is sort of like the Walking City Trail project, but on a countrywide level. Slowways is an effort to create curated walking and hiking routes like this that connect literally every town and city in the UK. They've already established and vetted over 7,000 of these routes so far, and they are just a handful of months away from having a true bona fide countrywide map. And a little before the hearing, I actually connected with the founder of Slowways, and I found out that they are creating a new tech platform that will allow people in other cities to basically suggest and create their own trails across town, basically, to look at these, to share these trails with friends and colleagues individually, to integrate them into a larger map like the one that we aspire to make here in Boston. And while this is not certain yet, we are having conversations already about trying to integrate this technology into the Walking City Trail in the future, so that people in Boston with ideas for where additional trails could go, don't have to necessarily come out to a group hike to start putting that out there. This technology will likely make it possible for folks to actually propose these trails, to send in routes that we can then invite people to walk and kind of appraise themselves. So what we're moving toward, in short, is basically opening up the process of trail making on this, creative grassroots level to a much wider audience here in Boston, potentially. And this methodology of trail making has already started popping up in more cities since the Walking City Trail was born. We've seen similar routes pop up recently in Denver, Seattle, Sacramento, and actually just a few weeks ago, a bunch of folks in Providence started a trail down there called the Providence Crosstown Trail that runs about 13 miles across the city from Nutaconquenut Hill Park to an overlook of Narragansett Bay. So, there is a nascent movement starting to emerge right here, reimagining what is possible when it comes to wayfinding in the cityscape, and what, and what it takes to really build a trail, in a way that I think opens up the possibility of trail building to far more people than we've likely seen before. Demystifying, the idea that you need a massive 6-figure budget, lots of institutional permissions, and, experience with construction to create something that can yield a wonderful wayfinding experience on foot. So that's pretty much the direction that we're heading in with the Walking City Trail. It's always wonderful to find people locally or in other cities who are tinkering away at similar initiatives, whether they're built around something as codified as a trail, or simply the act of getting more people out into spaces that are routinely overlooked. And so it's a real honor to be here today to talk with you all about this, to share what we've been doing. And I'd love to delve into any questions that people have, but that's basically, the history and the future of the Walking City Trail project at this point. I don't want to say we're just getting started, because it's been a very packed 2.5 years of bringing this trail to life and making it visible. But it is great to be in a place where now we can start to build up from there, basically. So that's what we'll be doing in 2025 and probably well beyond.
Great. Thank you so much, Miles, for sharing all that. Yeah, we're very excited with the work that you're doing, and I'm going to open it up now for questions. So I'm going to stop the recording.